if you can please come and join us and sit down. Join us in our lecture hall, inshallah. All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We have a very distinguished guest speaker for our ICSC Sunday program, Dr. Salman Khan, who will be presenting today on benefits of fasting. Dr. Salman Khan graduated from Karachi, Pakistan in 1994 and completed his internal medicine training at LAC USC Medical Center. He has been serving the Los Angeles community for over 2 decades, providing inpatient care at various hospitals and outpatient services through Primary Care Solutions, PCS, at 3 locations across the region. Dr. Khan currently serves on the Board of Governors for Los Angeles Care Health Plan, the largest publicly operated health plan in the United States, where he advocates for quality, accessible health care and health equity in underserved communities. Committed to lifelong learning, he is pursuing a master's in health administration at USC. In addition to his clinical and leadership roles, Dr. Khan is deeply involved in community service. He is the president of the Niswa Association, a nonprofit that supports victims of domestic violence and refugees, and serves on the board of directors of the Islamic Center of Southern California. In his spare time, Dr. Khan loves to play pickleball and watch movies. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Salman Khan.
Bismillahi tawakkaltu alallahi wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. In the name of Allah, I trust. In Allah, there is no might and no power but in Allah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. My Lord, expand for me my chest with assurance and ease for me my task, and unite the knot from my tongue that they may understand my speech. Thank you, Erica, for the kind introduction. Originally, this talk was about benefit of fasting. However, I changed the title slightly with fasting and healing. And as we move along, you will realize why. I would like to keep this talk as interactive as possible. And so if anyone has any question related to this topic, you can raise your hand and we'll answer them. Before we begin, I would like to share a few important disclaimers. I'm not an Islamic scholar. The presentation is not meant to interpret any Islamic rulings or religious obligations regarding fasting. Whether someone can or should fast is a personal decision, often involving both medical and spiritual consideration. Everyone's health situation is different. An individual decision should be made in consultation with your healthcare providers and spiritual advisors. My aim today is to share the current medical understanding of fasting and its effects on the human body. The purpose of this gathering is purely educational. We'll explore the history of fasting, what fasting is from a medical point of view, and how the body responds to the fasting, what the scientific literature says about fasting, and how the body is basically can be beneficial with this. So that's what we are going to share this knowledge. This lecture is not a prophetic medicine, but rather a general overview of fasting as a health practice supported by the medical research. You may consider controversial, or you may consider that surprising that a physician standing in front of you and talking about not eating and about fasting as a therapeutic tool. So, yes, this may be uncomfortable for someone. However, medicine has always advanced, challenging old assumptions and seeking better ways to treat long standing diseases. When we talk, when we think about illnesses, we also must ask an important question: how did people ever get better before the modern medicine? And of course, some people became ill and some sadly died, but mostly survived. So that tells us something very important, that nature must have built healing mechanism into the human body, or we can say that nature always has a backup plan. So what I'm trying to do today is to tap into those natural mechanisms and ask a simple but very powerful question: is there something in fasting that we overlooked? Historically, people didn't fast for health. They fasted because the lack of food, and they fasted because of religious observation, or the family of 5 or 7 and they did not have enough food. But the more I studied this, and especially the biochemistry, and the more my thinking got changed. So, what I have done so far today is put together a clear, evidence based summary grounded in physiology and biochemistry, exploring what fasting actually does in the human body. Much of our eating behaviors is conditioned and habitual, driven by the routines. For example, very common scenario that when we are at a workplace, there is a lunchtime. Whether you are hungry or not, you have to take the lunchtime, right? So over time, the people have been taught by culture, by media, and social norms to ignore their body's natural, signals and but eat constantly as regimented. So the idea that we must eat 5 or 6 times a day is a myth. The human body does not require continuous calorie intake, and many believe about frequent eating are fundamentally flawed. Over 99% of human history, people didn't eat 3 meals a day. Surprising. Humans evolved to switch between fed and fasted states. The metabolic flexibility is a survival adaptation, not a weakness. As we go way back and we realize that Socrates and I always have difficulty pronunciation, um, Hippocrates, they both were around the same era. Socrates was a Greek philosopher and Hippocrates was a Greek physician. They both promoted fasting for their mental clarity. Hippocrates said once, it was very famous quote, to eat when you are sick is to feed your sickness. So ancient medical system used fasting to treat inflammation and digestive illnesses long before the pharmaceutical existed. Nearly every major religion includes fasting. While spiritually framed, these practices normalized metabolic rest and reduced insulin for thousands of years, long before understood the science. Medical studies have shown that Ramadan fasting is safe for most healthy individuals and improves weight, insulin sensitivity, and the cholesterol numbers, similar to intermittent fasting, studied in modern research. One of our own, Dr. Jasser Hathout, who is a UCLA professor, has done a wonderful work on benefits of fasting. And the researchers like him, Dr. Jasser Hathout, is a physician and a scholar and a professor at UCLA, explored scientific evidence showing fasting's health benefits, even while understanding its cultural and spiritual importance in communities. And that is the reason why I changed the slide from title from benefits of fasting to fasting and healing, because he has done a wonderful work on benefits of fasting. Historical, if we go all the way back, historical Islamic scholars like Imam al-Basri describe fasting holistically and involving the body, mind, behavior, which parallels with the modern views on discipline and psychological health. Again, the scientific literature recognized that religious fasting patterns like Ramadan fasting share many health effects. And with the secular fasting protocols, especially when practiced mindfully and with hydration, good nutrition in non-fasting hours, that is definitely beneficial to the health. This is, I did the screenshot for Dr. Jasser Hathout, who basically has a very good YouTube work, and these part four series is available on the YouTube. A great work is a good watch, and I highly recommend that if you watch this Science in the Quran in series, but especially these four-part YouTube video that Dr. Jasser Hathout compiled. Another Muslim physician has done significant amount of work. This is another very journal which is published in a very reputable medical journals, another which is Annals of Nutrition and Metabolism. Also talks about Islamic fasting and health. So now moving towards the modern scientific understanding of fasting. When we talk about medical perspective on fasting, so in general, I'll tell you that there was one historical fasting concept, but starting of like 20th century, the therapeutic fasting enters into the medicine. Early 20th century, physicians used fasting as measure for obesity, diabetes, and epilepsy, seizure disorder, because leading to the ketogenic therapy. And what we observed during this, that improved blood sugar levels, it reduced the inflammation and improved the mental clarity. But fasting fell out of the favor. Why? Because pharmaceutical treatments expanded. There were so many pharmaceuticals coming up at that time. So since they expanded, the benefits of fasting was going down. In 1930s, was a major studies done, but unfortunately those studies were done on animals. The first study that I mentioned here was done on rats, clearly indicated that calorie restriction extended lifespan. Focused was on how much to eat, but not when. So fasting itself was still viewed as extreme or unsafe, which was completely uh, uh, considered incorrect. Another study, which was done in around the same time, poor monkeys. This is the rhesus monkey study that has done 30% calorie restriction versus standard American style diet. Results in calorie restricted groups shown 26% longer lifespan. Also indicated 50% less cardiovascular diseases. And in fact, greater than 90% reduction in diabetes. An NIH-based monkey study that has control group diet, which is based on plant-based proteins, minimal animal protein, low sugar, low fat, and fed twice daily. So what are the results? When they compared these two studies in two sets of monkeys, the equal or better outcome than calorie restriction. So what was our conclusion? We concluded that diet quality and timing matter more than calories alone. So this is something very important that we captured, that we gathered because of those poor monkeys did so much work for the humans that what we learned. This was a landmark trials. Now here comes the modern scientific understanding of fasting, which is we call intermittent fasting. Very, very popular these days. Very popular. So in 2005 until 2010, for the 5 years, research on insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome was tremendous. And in 2014, there was a landmark trial by Longo and Matson on cell metabolism that's showing the fasting activate called autophagy, mitochondrial repair, and longevity pathways. I'm so sorry, these are very heavy words, but just hold on to it. I'll explain. Autophagy means cellular recycling. That how we found out. This is so amazing that not in the very recent past, we found out in 2014 there was a scientist who basically received a Nobel Prize just based on identifying autophagy. And autophagy is a mechanism that our body is basically recycling our own cells. That is really, really amazing work that they did and a great learning from that. In 2017 until present, human trials confirmed the benefits of time restricted eating, alternate day fasting, and 5 to 2 5 days and 2 days fasting pattern. This is a screenshot that I took from a World Health Organization that basically describes very clearly in a simple way that describes the difference between the time restricted eating versus intermittent fasting and Ramadan fasting. So this is been studied, people are aware. Um, I know a very common scenario that in any work environment during the Ramadan, if you mention that I'm fasting and people find out that how, and is a common response that, oh, fasting, oh, you don't eat anything. Wow, how you manage it? Well, we will just, I'll describe that how we manage it during fasting, how the body has, this is why I always say this is the perfect machine ever built, which already had a backup plan for every situation. This is another paper that was published in a very reputable journal called Eastern Mediterranean Health Journal. Is a is a monthly journal that basically talk about the comparison of time restricted feeding and Islamic fasting. Uh, and based on this study, the conclusion was that there is a reported positive health effects, which is really, really amazing that we found out based on this study and all the other studies. So there is so much documented data that we have that is showing that there is a positive health effects. Okay, so we'll take a little deep breath here and I'll just go a little recap. I see that a few people just joined. So, in the recap, I will say that so far what we have learned is, or what we have discussed is called a pre prehistoric era. We talked about all the history of fasting. We talked about ancient fasting when Hippocrates and Chinese medicine and all the they were using fasting as therapeutically. Then we talked about uh, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, every religion used fasting. And last 100 years, I would say, the medical use for obesity, diabetes, and significant other medical problems, we promoted calorie restricted and intermittent fasting. With all this knowledge so far that we have at this moment about fasting, so there is a very well documented evidence proving that there are some health benefits with fasting. So when I look back, and Dr. Jasser Hathout also mentioned very, quite a bit of a description for this in detail. But one thing caught my attention also, that it looks like the whole world is basically searching the explanation which has clearly described in Surah Baqarah, ayah number 184, especially the last part of the Surah Baqarah. And I really want everyone to take the time when you go back, read this ayah and try to read the translation and tafsir to understand. And very specific word says, and to fast is better for you if only you knew, that means only you knew. That means if we have understanding what is fasting for us, we will definitely do it. So how we can explore this, um, the meanings of this part of the ayah. So next, I would say 10, 12 slides. I will be um, quickly presenting just one idea that you can imagine that how body is responding when we start our fasting. So the body first uses glycogen. I may use few medical terms, and I will explain. Is energy source. So the body first uses glycogen, which is stored in the liver and muscles. So when we start our fast, the glycogen is providing us the energy. But glycogen has some limitation. The blood sugar stays normal even for days, unless someone is on insulin or diabetic medication. We'll talk about separately. Then the next step is gluconeogenesis. Again, little heavy word, but this is after glycogen storage depletes, the body produces glucose from a normal protein turnover, not the muscle breakdown. So at this moment, everything stays fine, muscles remain stable, no muscle breakdown, and it's called gluconeogenesis, a metabolic pathway which basically synthesizes glucose from the non-carbohydrate precursors, primarily occurring in the liver and the kidneys. This mechanism is going on already without you knowing, without we even notice that, right? This is the process. Now, the low insulin unlocks the fat storage, and fat is converted into ketones, which every cell, including the brain cell, can use. So now again, when you start the fasting, the energy is given by the glycogen. Then the glycogen stores depletes. The energy comes from glucogenesis, and then the insulin goes low. The fat storage start energy producing, and they become ketones. That is the most effective nutrient that brain utilizes, and this is all happening automatically without you even notice. So studies shown that up to 70% of brain energy comes from ketones during the fasting time. And the ketones considered uh, cleaner and more efficient energy for the clear thoughts. And that has been proven. The body has two energy accounts. You may find a little interesting: a checking account and a saving account. The checking account, we call it glycogen, which is a short term energy. And the saving account is a fat, long term energy. So fat can only be accessed when insulin levels are low. So insulin is the key that locks or unlocks the fat storage. So high insulin, fat stores. Low insulin, fat release and fat burns. So definitely at this moment, some of you might be thinking that insulin, so is not already in our body? Why insulin is bad? It looks like the insulin is the culprit. Insulin is the one that making the calling the shot. So there is only one reliable way to lower the insulin is stop eating and fasting. So that is the reason why the science has um, uh, promoting this and understanding the different fasting options are available, like time restricted eating, alternate day fasting, and multi-day fasting. The method is flexible, but the mechanism is the same for all the fasting options. So, because insulin is considered inflammatory, and what is inflammatory? So, inflammation, uh, in general, we need to avoid. Like, for example, the common way of describing to my patients usually is we have common medications available like ibuprofen or these are anti-inflammatory medications, means that if there is any inflammation, we can give these medications to calm that down inflammation. And somehow if the body is in a constant state of inflammation, that's a problem. And unfortunately, insulin, when the high insulin level in the body, it's basically inflammatory. So because insulin is considered inflammatory, that's why it's not just about the glucose numbers. It's very important for diabetic patients to have their A1C, which is the test we do for diabetes patients. It's important for them to have the A1C lower down. But it does not mean that the risk of heart disease is low and the survival is less. So that's also very important to understand. But if insulin is bad, why we need it for diabetes, right? So far, you may have gathered that I'm saying that insulin is the bad guy. So if the insulin is bad, then why we need for diabetes? Again, it comes down to this, that this is the perfect machine ever built, balance. And that is the reason why we need to keep the balance. We need insulin. Of course, there are two diseases process, type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, when you do not have insulin and you were born without the process of making insulin. Type 2 diabetes, you have insulin, but insulin is resistant. So in those situations, yes, you need insulin. But in general, like uh, there are there is has been documented data that the fasting and the brain health has increased significantly when they notice patients on intermittent fasting. The fasting increases brain derived neurotrophic factors. The BDNF promotes new brain cell formation, improves learning, memory, and mental clarity. Why growth hormone matters? Now again, a very important concept that we just learned last, you know recently, actually not that far, that uh, why growth hormones matters, and why not just take the growth hormone as exogenous. Like for example, why don't we take the growth hormone? Number one, it is extremely expensive. It's not easy to take the growth hormone. However, whatever uh, the amount you pay, even then the growth hormone is related to a significant side effects. You cannot take the growth hormone without significant side effects. So studies have shown that 24-48 hours of fasting increases up to 20,000% increase in growth hormone. This data is surprising. And growth hormone is essential for muscle growth, important for fat metabolism. It's a key hormone associated with youthfulness and vitality. Growth hormone supports muscle maintenance, strength, energy levels, and cognitive function. Of course, healthy aging. So fasting stimulates the body's own growth hormone naturally. We do not need to spend this much money to increase. Fasting has the mechanism to increase the growth hormone. There is this word called autophagy. I did mention earlier. And what is autophagy? I'm not gonna spend much time, but just just to understand. By the way, these days I always recommend that everyone basically has their gadgets in your pockets, and that basically has a technology, Google available, Chat GPT or something. Do your research. Anytime you have a word that you don't understand, just type and find out what it is. At least you'll get something. So autophagy is basically a concept of cellular recycling. Our body basically is doing the recycling of our own cells. And that process has been documented, that is based on intermittent fasting or the fasting that we observe. Fasting changes the gene expression. Very important. I'm going to discuss very briefly these things, not going to into details to understand, but less than 1% is actively expressed. And the DNA is wrapped around the histones, which is again a medical term, that which removes the acetyl groups from the histones, unwrap the DNA, and results in different genes are turned on. So in general, we have realized that fasting process is basically helping the gene transformation or gene expression. Diet directly affects gene behavior. What you eat and when you eat, it's really important. That determines which gene are expressed and which repair pathways are activated. So fasting does not just add anything artificial. It reveals and activates the existing biology. So it's not that you're doing fasting so some new system come into your body. No, the fasting is actually just basically activates the existing biology. So interesting side note, for the compounds like turmeric, which is very common, right? So turmeric we cook all the time. So turmeric also activates this FOXO3, and then not because they are antioxidant themselves, but because they triggers the genetic antioxidant pathway. So these words I should, take away message from today. If you need to Google or if you need to search antioxidant, list of food which is antioxidant. What is, the process and which are the food that can help us basically in the process of antioxidants. So the key takeaway again, fasting doesn't change your genes. I'm not saying that if you do fasting, that fasting will change the genes. You have the genes, but it changes how your genes behave, which is very important. So far, we have gathered this data. So again, very important uh, vitamin to basically discuss and share. Vitamin D. Please make sure whenever you have your annual physical, whenever you go to your physicians, whenever you have, make sure you ask to check for the vitamin D level. Very common to have a low vitamin D because vitamin D is very important for gene expression. So vitamin D is a key regulator of gene expression. The deficiency impairs the body's ability to repair. I usually describe vitamin D as an Uber driver because vitamin D basically helps the protein, helps, taking from one place to another and respond to stress, activate protective genetic pathways. So vitamin D deficiency handicapped genetic responses. So that is why it is so important for us to have a good levels of vitamin D. By the way, on a side note, I always see that the patient comes saying that I have this many vitamins. I take this for skin, this for hair, this for this for that. I will briefly discuss about the vitamin supplementation, and I have a complete separate talk on vitamin or supplementation. So in general, as I said, again, this is a perfect machine ever built, right? If I start fasting today, not eating anything, no supplements, for whole 1 month, I will have enough supply of vitamins in my body. So please don't worry. You may at certain time, there are certain diseases that when you cannot consume enough food, yes, in that case the supplements are allowed. But in general, otherwise healthy individuals who can eat normally should not be relying too much on supplements. That is the reason why they call supplement. They're not an actual diet. Okay. So so prevalence of vitamin D deficiency is extremely common because what are the limiting factors these days? I mean, California, we should not be complaining, but limited sun exposure, indoor lifestyle, sunscreen use. We are protecting our skin from the wind, from vitamin D. So vitamin D stats cannot be guessed, must be measured with a blood test. You cannot just say that I'm low. Just go to your doctor, get it checked. So vitamin D is involved in 300 plus biochemical reactions, a major harm. So many of these reactions regulate gene activation, immune function, and cellular repair because very important for us to keep our immune system activated. What is immune system? Immune system is our own army inside our body that is always ready to fight against all the disease processes and every bug and virus coming. So our immune system, which is our army, standing right there, ready to fight against anything. But this army needs some nutrition, this army. So vitamin D is basically regulates. Vitamin D helps to so gene activation, immune function, as well as the cellular repair. So adequate vitamin D is gene response appropriately to fasting, illnesses, and environmental stress. So, what is the takeaway? Fasting turns on the repair genes, and vitamin D allows them to work properly. Make sense? Now we talk about expert perspective, and I've done my own research and learning and throughout the years, and so we have not just Muslim scholars and scientists and physicians working on it. There are significant amount of non-Muslim scholars and physicians and scientists working on. So I have few, which is Dr. Pradeep Jamnadas. Dr. Pradeep Jamnadas promotes fasting for metabolic health based on human physiology and evolutionary biology, not a religious fasting. And his work doesn't specifically reference the faith-based fasting protocols, but he has done tremendous work on explaining how important it is for us to do the fasting and how fasting can help us. Again, Dr. Goldhammer works on medically supervised therapeutic fasting, is clinical and disease focused. Again, it's not religion oriented. His expertise lies in water only fasting protocol for metabolic and blood pressure and chronic disease outcomes. And he has shown the data. You can take his name and search that. He has done tremendous amount of work. Then we have Dr. Walter Longo. Dr. Longo's work on periodic fasting and the fasting mimicking diet is science based and designed to benefit longevity and metabolic health rather than religious fasting practices. So they do talk about that how important it is, like intermittent fasting, but they look at this from a medical lens. They don't look at in a different lens because of course, for us, for Muslims, importance of fasting is basically not just based on the health benefits. The importance of fasting for us is spiritual, obeying something what we were asked. But the rest of the world or the non-Muslim scholars and scientists, when they are basically working on, they found out that what are the benefits. Again, Dr. Greger supports time-restricted eating and fasting from a purely evidence-based nutritional science perspective, without specific reference again to any religious fasting. So now the question is, I'm sure um, some of you may have this question, or most of you have this question, that if the fasting is so important and so beneficial, why we do not hear about this, right? If the fasting, so far I have shown you history, I have shown you science, everything. The fasting is important. So why we don't hear about it? So again, very important. There is no financial sponsor. Who will sponsor fasting? If they'll sponsor fasting, their business will go bankrupt, right? So there is no financial sponsor. There is no industry profit when they promote fasting. Who will drink the Coca-Cola, right? Who will drink the so there is no so there is no industry profit when people fast and when people improve metabolically. This is very sad, unfortunately, but the people rely less on medication. As a result, these benefits are under discussed when we are fasting, often misled as starvation rather than a physiology. Who should fast and how much? In my beginning of my presentation, I said that uh, it's a personal decision of fasting. Again, I'm here not to promote religious fasting, whether you do it or not. It's a personal decision. However, based on everyone's clinical situation is different. You need to discuss with your healthcare provider or your religious spiritual advisor. However, in general, the goal is to stay healthy, right? The goal is to stay healthy, prevent diabetes and any other metabolic condition or any other disease, maintain weight. This is our goal. So recommended approach is whether you do time restricted eating, eat once or twice daily, keep meals within 6 to 8 hours. So for example, our Ramadan fasting is different. However, whatever the benefits that I discussed in Ramadan fasting, unfortunately, at iftar time, it completely nullifies. It goes away because the amount of food and the type of food that we eat. But another surprising research found out that the body is basically behaving, managing that food when you eat after fasting, even that food is not too healthy, manages very well, surprisingly. So I'm not promoting that you have samosas and everything all every iftar or pakoras, but I'm just saying is that this is the built-in system. It manages very well. So the time restricted eating, which is very close to our fasting, Ramadan fasting. So when we talk about time restricted eating means very important concept that if we have a breakfast at certain time, for example, we have a breakfast at let's say 8 o'clock. Okay. So our next meal on an average has to be like 5 to 6 hours gap in our next meal. So this is called time restricted eating. During this time period, try to avoid, I would say, zero sugar. You can drink water, you can drink coffee, which is black. However, in between meals, that's what we call time restricted eating. That is really, really helpful. And that is aligned with our Ramadan fasting also. So, what are the examples? Like lunch at 1 p.m., dinner at 6, 7 p.m. So, we have on an average 5, 6 hours of time. So, in during this time period, no eating, no munching. No, you have your lunch. Make sure, condition yourself that even though something is very tempting and very attractive, you will wait until the next meal time. That will give you a significant amount of health benefits. As I previously discussed, I know that few people are still coming. That the storage, the checking account, the saving account, the glycogen, certain numbers of fasting, glycogen is producing us. So the the problem is this, that for example, in general, when you eat something, especially sugar, the blood sugar levels goes high, right? At the same time, brain sense there is more glucose. What do I need to do? The brain send the message to the pancreas, hey, do some work, release insulin. Insulin gets released. Now the insulin is there. Now insulin is basically grabbing all the glucose, putting into the muscles. However, the important concept to understand, the time that glucose stays into the blood, let's say for example 2 hours, but insulin stays in the blood for 5 hours, even after the glucose is gone. That is bad. And for example, after your 8 o'clock breakfast, at 11 o'clock, you found some very nice chocolate chip cookies. Oh, I need to grab that. Oh, just one cookie. So that one cookie went in there, increases glucose. And brain again sends. Brain is not realizing that the insulin is already there. Brain again sends the message to the pancreas. Hey, dude, you need to work. More insulin came out. And the more insulin came out, already existing insulin, now this insulin going up more again. So what happening is, unfortunately, we are not giving body a chance for insulin to go down to touch the baseline. We are keeping the insulin in our body for a certain level. And unfortunately, that high level of insulin is toxic. That high level of insulin in our body for a certain time period is inflammatory, causes significant amount of inflammation, and that inflammation leads to disease process. So that is why it is so important that every time there is a patient comes to me, I like try to educate my patients as much as possible with the physiology a little bit, so that when you understand the disease process, when you understand something, it is important to have it is important. I've seen that a good compliance with the medication in the food, if you understand, right? So, so eating the right food, of course, always a good question. Oh, I eat very healthy. There was one patient, a diabetic patient, and despite all the medications, his sugar was still not coming down. So I always discuss with my patients that what you eat and what did you do, what's your activity level. So he came in like, you know what, um, I need to sit down with you and tell me what's your eating habits. So tell me, what did you eat for the breakfast today? He said, Doc, I eat very healthy. Okay, very healthy. I said, okay, what is healthy? So first thing in the morning, I have big orange juice that I do drink, very healthy. I said, oh my God, stop. I don't need to hear. I need to go further. Okay, just stop right there. You are diabetic, and especially you're not squeezing these oranges in home. I'm very positive that you're getting this thing from Costco or whatever, you know. So the shelf life of those orange juices, with the orange juice was not made yesterday, right? The orange juice that stayed that in that shelf for quite some time. So that orange juice had significant amount of preservatives and sugar. A very few orange was there, right? So please do not. So that is the reason why it is always a better idea to go that the food that existed long before the modern industry. The food existed long before the modern industry. And what was the food? Vegetables, limited fruit. Fruit is also good, but limited fruit, and I'll tell you why. So the natural, minimally altered foods, this is very important. So avoid processed food. It is very difficult. That's why I say avoid. I did not say don't eat processed food, because at this very moment, it is almost impossible to avoid to not to eat processed food. So avoid as much as possible. Avoid refined sugars. Avoid packaging snacks. Please, it's very it's very tempting that say, you know what, I'm going to grab these bars, the protein bars, and they're very healthy. I'm not eating. I'm just going to. Please make sure. I'm not saying don't. I don't want their business to be go bankrupt, but I'm just saying is that please watch. Develop a habit of look at the nutrients, the glucose number, the sugar amount. Very important. Honestly speaking, if all of you who are here today and look at the amount of sugar each soda can has, almost like on an average 53 gram. You know how much 53 gram is? Not 7 spoon, 12 spoon. 10 to 12 tablespoon. I'm not talking about teaspoon, tablespoon. 10 to 12 tablespoon. So imagine if you're putting in this much of capacity, you're putting 10 tablespoon of sugar. That is, so please take home, if one thing that you will take home today, I would highly recommend, please avoid drinking soda, or not, doesn't matter, zero diet or something. They're basically promoting this is we have found and we have recognized that all these years, I'm very sorry, I may get dinged because of that, but I have no fear saying this thing out, sharing this thing out loud, that American Heart Association really did not help us by claiming low fat diet, low fat diet. It was not the low fat diet was a problem. The problem was a low carb diet. We need to promote low carb diet, not low fat diet. Today you go to the any grocery store, you see shelves full of low fat diet. But there is everywhere is there are the three trifecta: salt, sugar, and um, uh, it- huh? Right. So these things we need to avoid as much as possible. So fruits, I believe they're kind of overrated. They're good, excellent, but overrated. Why? Because nowadays, I recommend all of you to please use your gadgets for some benefit to yourself. What I mean is that when you have your phone, Google search glycemic index. What are the fruits that has high glycemic index, and what are the foods has low glycemic index? What is glycemic index? Glycemic index means that the fruits or any food, how much quantity of glucose in that. It's very important. For example, whenever we go any gatherings, parties, we see, wow, watermelon, all the melons, great food. But be careful. All the melons, very high glycemic index. Be careful. The best I would recommend low glycemic index fruits are apples, peaches, plums. These are fruits that basically, and again, moderation is the key. Even if you think that is low glycemic index, and if you start going crazy on eating that, that is also a problem. So again, moderation is the key. Protein. We need to have three important nutrients: protein, carbs, fat. Our diet has to have a balance of these three. But sometimes people will go crazy on protein, right? And I remember there are, I don't want to name anybody, but there were like some very famous programs, they're only protein diet programs, this and that. The person who basically created that program died because of a heart attack. So I'm just saying is that it's not one way or the other. It's about a balance. It's about keeping the balance. Otherwise, if, for example, if we were born that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have guided us, do this. This body is a perfect machine ever built. Perfect machine ever built. And as I said, that we already have a backup plan. The nature already built in the backup plan for us to keep our body. It's just us basically messing up with it all the time. So protein, most adult needs 50 grams of protein per day. Don't go crazy on that. Regular whole foods, normal meals. Protein deficiency is rare. People eat very typical diet, so it's very rare for somebody to see the protein deficiency. And the protein powders, especially the young, whoever the young crowd sitting here, going to the gym and this and that, like having, oh, I need to have protein powder. I see some heads are shaking. So protein powder, I need to do this. Avoid. I'm not saying completely no, but again, moderation is the key, right? So please make sure that these things, which is not very recommended. Protein supplements often raise blood sugars, stimulate insulin release, and increase the IGF, that growth factor. So avoid unnecessary supplementation, as I said earlier, also, so that the protein supplements are not needed for most people. In general, our food, if you do not have any problem, any medical problem, and you are able to digest or able to swallow food, I think there is enough good food, vegetables, fruits, meat, fish, chicken, that you can eat and have enough protein and enough nutrients. Okay, so that supplements only when medically indicated, as I mentioned, not all the time, not for every patient. So there's a very usually in slides I just start with only this word and people say, "What are you talking about?" Don't get old. So why how can I stop that, right? So what does that mean? That means is that diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, degenerative disease, all these things. If we slow the biological aging, we reduce the disease risks. And how we slow the biological aging? We just learn significant amount of work, research, and everything has been, it's all related to eating habits. It's all related to the eating habits. So aging is accelerated today. Why? We are seeing 20, 30-year-old with the body of 50 or 50 plus old. Why is that? Because of the food processes. What is causing a poor diet, excess sugar, poor sleep, chronic stress, and sedentary lifestyle? These are prevailing in our societies, very common. So, how to stay biologically young? Because we say that biologically active. How to stay biologically calm? Answer is one word: fasting. Right? So, keep genetic material healthy by fasting, maintaining the healthy weight, eating whole foods, try to avoid any processed food, and prioritize your sleep, your stress control. Of course, there are some stresses that you can control, there are some stresses that you cannot. Like your boss is very tough, giving you a hard time. You need that job. You cannot just go and slap your boss. No, you just have to tolerate, right? So there are some stresses that you can avoid. There are some stresses you cannot. Then balance. So there are anti-aging effects, even if not labeled anti-aging medicine. But fasting has anti-aging effects, which is very well documented. A very common question that people ask and very common situation these days around the world about GLP-1 medications. You may not know, but when I say Ozempic, everyone says, "Oh yeah, I know Ozempic," or Wegovy, or very common names these days. I don't want to take any specific names. Great medications, good revolutions, GLP-1 inhibitors. But these inhibitors, what they're doing actually, mimicking fasting. They don't let you eat. And one common situation, think about it. Whenever you go to the doctor's office and you need to have a blood test, what they ask you to do? Come tomorrow. Why? Fasting. Why? When you have a procedure, they ask you what? Don't eat 24 hours. Why? Have you thought of that? The body comes in a very stable metabolic state. We cannot evaluate if you're not fasting for 24 hours. The actual accurate measurement in your body when you're fasting. So, with this, I would say thank you so much. Moderation is the key. Moderation is the key. And I'm open for the questions. Sure, sure. Okay. Yeah, there's the break. Hmm. It all depends. As I said earlier, every patient, every person is actually different. So it according to your situation, according to your age, according to your medical conditions and all that. So yes, it is recommended for 2 meals, but it all depends. So if you have further, I can later on sit with you and guide you. So how we can. But yes, it is permissible. Thank you so much, and I'll give my to Sister Erica. Thank you. Yes, sorry. One. We can do more questions after the. Yeah, I can be available for your questions. Fasting in the morning is better. Fasting first thing in the morning. That's overnight fasting. No. If you have a 12 hours, minimum 12 to 14 hours overnight fast, if you do the blood work, you will be okay. 12 to 14 hours overnight fast will be okay for any blood test. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salman Khan, for this very informative and enlightening presentation. Please join us in our prayer hall right now for Doha prayer, inshallah. And please join us next Sunday for benefits of fast. I'm sorry, with for depression and anxiety with Sister Robo Asos from the Los Angeles County Department.